pandemic got us into a reflective space and made us look inward to see what we can do for the world at large. As a self-expression coach, I became a catalyst for women and started Vani, a one-on-one coaching program for women on finding their voice, to speak up, to be visible. As a storyteller, I spotted there were many ordinary people amongst us leading extraordinary lives, making a difference to the world, and they needed to be heard. Thus was born You and I with Rashmi Shetty, where amazing personal journeys with their uniqueness and individuality are showcased. A reaffirmation of the fact, open your eyes wider, the world is far more beautiful when we acknowledge the presence of both you and I. Our guest today is Dr. Neena Verma, an Appreciative Inquiry expert, grief and growth specialist, and leadership, team, and life coach. Her grief and growth practice that she began 15 years ago found great depths after the sudden demise of her eldest son in 2014. She has since then devoted herself fully to counseling, coaching, and companioning for grief affirmation, life purpose clarity, resilience, and post-traumatic growth. Neena combines Appreciative Inquiry, Meaning-reconstructive Grief Therapy, Logotherapy, positive psychology, compassion-focused therapy, poetry, writing, and arts to facilitate healing, resilience, and deep growth at an individual, family, leadership, and team level. Neena has authored 2 books. Watch as she shares about her recent book, Grief, Growth, Grace, a Sacred Pilgrimage, which is helping bereaved people as well as grief and growth practitioners around the globe. Neena also runs an independent library movement in the services of less privileged children. An inspirational journey, nevertheless, as she shares how the ups and downs have made her who she is today. Hi Neena, honored to have you on You and I with Rashmi Shetty. Always a pleasure talking to you, I know, and so much to learn from you. So what I'm curious about is, what was little Neena like to the Dr. Neena Verma we all know today?
First of all, namaste, and thank you so much, Rashmi. Happy to be here. Hello, hi, adab, sasrikal to everyone. How was little Neena like? Little Neena was secretly mischievous. Whenever she had an opportunity, she was naughty. She liked to be, just playful and left alone to her own devices and her own mischiefs. I was middle of the 3 daughters, and somehow my elder sister was not born healthy. She was the only surviving of the twins. So she had, she was weak and fragile from the beginning. And so she needed to be looked after. And I was co-opted by my parents as the third guardian to my elder sister. So I was, for early parts of my life, I was also a kind of caregiver for her. And my younger sister arrived a few years later. And she kind of, immediately from early on took me up as her, what should I call, her third parent in a way, because she was, the gap was about 5 years or so, and my parents were both working, and we both were more kind of like each other. So she somehow gelled more with me than with my elder sister. Of course, 3 of us were all close. So in a very weird way, I was an elder figure to both my sisters, younger as well as elder. So that kind of took away some of my time being the mischievous, the naughty me that I was. But whenever I got an opportunity, I would be out on the streets and in the park in the neighborhood park or in the playground in school. I was naughty, not in a harmful way, but I liked my little mischief. I was creative. I was not I was not, I didn't have a good hand in drawing or so. That was kind of very, very elementary. I barely managed to do a kite or an apple or a fish. But I made up little poems from as far back in time as I remember. I did write poetry, I did write short stories. And later in my school, I was roped into the theatre team, and I was assisting the teacher in charge in writing screenplays and dialogues and things like that. So that kind of, creative bit. And I loved reading. I used to get lost in books. So that's how little Neena was. She would read anything and everything except her textbooks.
Really? So how were you in studying?
Really. I was until class 4 or 5. I think my parents had a handful of, complaints about that my homeworks were not on time, that my performance teachers always felt that maybe they thought that my parents were not paying enough attention, because they thought that I shouldn't be doing as I was doing. They thought I should be doing better. So once or twice, those days PTMs were not so regular, but once or twice, whenever my parents had an occasion to visit the school, teachers would complain and they'd say that maybe you're not paying full attention. She is not scoring good. And why? So she has something in her, etc., etc. But the thing is that I was never diligent about my work. I never liked to sit down and study. So it was something that I would somehow manage just on the eve of the exam. And that too because my mother was a teacher, and she somehow, then got me around to sit down for a few hours, make a smart preparation, and then make through the exam somehow. I think class 6 onwards, something changed. I developed a lot of interest in English and mathematics after my parents changed my school. From class 6, I was in a different school. Mathematics and English somehow attracted me a lot, and that got me to develop greater sitting stamina and start studying. And I started to participate in a lot of things, poetry and stories, etc., which I was doing before also, but they did not have an expression in previous school. This school somehow offered some opportunities, and I started to participate in declamations, debates, and very often getting prizes. By the time I came in class 8, my school started that year. They started something called in the remembrance of the founder. It was a memorial all-round best student of the year shield, which was a rotating shield. So if a student won it for 3 years in a go, that student will get it forever. But otherwise, every year it rotated. So in its inaugural year in class 8, I was the surprise winner. And the surprise was for everybody, my parents, my class teacher, but most of all myself. I was totally, I was confused receiving the prize. What is it coming to me for? Later, my English teacher explained. He said that they didn't necessarily go for the top 3 graders, but they looked at the overall. And of course, by then I had come in the top 5 somehow. And so all of the things, put together, so I got it. And that changed. It's like what in coaching you and we often talk about power of expectations, or power of belief. That accomplishment created some kind of a belief that, yes, I can amount to something in life. And that kind of changed my engagement with my own self. And class 9, I continued to be a kind of mediocre student, but I was participating much more in the activities, in the co-curricular activities. I was writing much more. And class 10, somehow I managed to be third place holder in the school, all sections put together. But the margins were so narrow between the first and me. We were all 2 marks apart in class 10 boards, which was 9th and 10th put together. That was the last year that 9th and 10th syllabus was put together. So somehow all three of us were by our school very thoughtfully and graciously treated equally, because the margin was hardly anything between the three. So that was a moment of reckoning for myself, and I felt that now I need to pay attention to what I bring on table and get focused about it. So class 11 was different. Of course, I initially didn't like it because, so little Neena has now gone to class 11. You asked about little Neena, I've taken it already to
No,
class
but
11.
if you're in the top three, Neena, a natural choice for children in the top 20 would easily be science eyes closed.
Yeah,
So
yes.
you too were one of those who moved into science?
No. That's what I was about to come to, that obviously the school and my parents, they chose science for me. Why I did not have a say in the matter was also because I was underage. As I told you earlier, that for my eldest sister, I had been co-opted in early in for her caregiving. As a result, I was put to school earlier than my age. So I was youngest in my class, and that age limit also I did not cover. So a special application had gone to CBSE to get my age condoned or something like that. So I was pretty underage, and my parents and my teachers, they decided that we need to take the decision for what she will study. So then I was put in science, and I was secretly crying because I did not have my heart in it. I mean, especially biology and chemistry. I didn't know how to even stand in the lab for a few minutes because, I had an absolutely impossible kind of, sorry to use the word, but hate relationship with these subjects. And physics was something that I somehow managed to go through. Okay, not very well, but not bad either. So somehow my mother noticed, and again my English teacher in class 11, he also noticed. They all noticed that I wasn't happy. And my mother, being a teacher, she put this point across that, see, she scored a high distinction in all other subjects except science. In science, she doesn't have a distinction. That means she is not perhaps cut out for science. So that logic convinced everyone, and they agreed to take me out of science. But still, there was this kind of stigma with humanities. It was, sorry to say, but very sadly, people used to say that the high scorers don't go to humanities. It was looked down upon, which I feel very bad about.
Yeah, still is.
So,
only off late, I think things are changing.
Yes. And I wanted to study psychology and English literature. That's what my wish was, if somebody cared to ask, which everyone thought that she's not even 15.
She won't know.
To ask her, she wouldn't know. So somehow then I cried my heart before my mother, and my mother, I thought that she's got me out of science, now she will bail me out of this as well. But they all thought that the next best is commerce. And she secretly agreed to me that, okay, you do well in English, you get a distinction score in class 12, which used to be like some kind of an impossible kind of a dream. And then I will get you shifted to English honors. And I put all my heart. Class 11 and 12, I studied so well, because a condition of an overall of this percentage and a distinction in English. I said, I was studying not for commerce. I was studying commerce, but not for commerce, but only for that target. Now, what happened at the end of it in class 12, I did get a distinction in English. I was the only student in my school to get a distinction in English. But other than that, this is what I call a sweet accident of my life. In commerce overall, I was first in my entire zone, and I got a 15th place in CBSE's merit list.
Ooh, okay.
Now, my parents and teachers were more than convinced that I was just cut out for commerce. And my mother backed out. She broke the deal. And I landed in Shriram College of Commerce, whereas I wanted to land in Lady Shriram College for English honors or psychology honors. So that's how then I eventually became a management student.
But how did you accept it, Neena? Because when your heart is not in it and your heart is
Yes.
elsewhere, how did you tell yourself that it's okay, maybe they know
No,
better?
become honest was miserable. Okay, fine. I got a first division marks and I got 66%, which is considered fairly good. And under peer pressure and parental pressure and everything, because in Shriram College, everybody was doing CA also.
Yeah.
I agreed to do CWA, and there also I did very well. I got a rank and everything. I didn't have my heart in it. I was doing it all because I was a diligent child. I was an obedient child. I didn't say no to my parents ever for anything. And somehow they thought that they had taken a right decision in their good intentions and good wisdom. And nobody thought that, psychology would have some kind of a future, or English would have. I would end up being a teacher. My father visualized me as an IAS officer. My mother visualized me as a college lecturer, something like that, or a big corporate honko. This is what their common mutually agreed upon
What did
thing
Neena
was.
visualize for Neena?
I just saw myself studying psychology, researching psychology or English literature, either of the two or both maybe. And if I were left to myself, I would have ended up becoming only a researcher and an academician to earn my livelihood and read and write. That's what I was. A fierce introvert, despite being a mischievous child. I was a fierce introvert. I was. I always needed to retreat to myself after a group activity. Group activity used to overwhelm and tire me very much. So my world was psychology and English literature. That's where I used to come back to recharge myself. Fine, you are not allowing me to pursue these educations, but I can always read up on myself. So I was always reading up on myself. I was member of Delhi Public Library. And I was always, getting more books of literature or psychology home than anything else. And so that's what my secret haven was. That's what my safe place, my creative sanctuary was. That's where I retreated and recharged myself. So I managed to do well in BCom honors. Then at the time of my post-graduation, I discovered the subject of organizational behavior. And I said, wow, now this is one link back I can get. Because organizational behavior, is, as you know, is an amalgam science of psychology, anthropology, management, sociology. And I said, now this will allow me some kind of a U-turn or a side turn in the direction of psychology. And it did. But unfortunately, when I started my MPhil that year, Delhi University did not float the organizational behavior stream. And because I didn't, life didn't give me the luxury to drop a year and wait for it to happen next year. So I had to opt for management only. And so that's how I ended up studying management and taking up management as my career. Started for a brief bit, I taught in Delhi University colleges, but then Indian Oil is what I joined in the corporate career. Secretly, somewhere behind at my heart was like what I always envisioned myself to be. So that's what secretly sat at my heart. And at some stage, after all we had several between my husband and, after my marriage, several responsibilities. We needed to settle the family and so many things to do. So my earning was important. Indian Oil salary was good, perquisites were good. So that was very important for our responsibilities. Once things began to settle and my children were also no longer very tiny, they were like, 6 and 2 types, and they were getting very ignored and neglected. So I somehow managed to convince my husband to let me take a leave for a while and be at home to look after my children. I had been sitting on huge guilt. So once at home, what happened was, obviously I very happily took to being a full-time at-home mother. However, that was not just the whole of it. That also allowed me opportunity to pick my books again. I started to read again. And organizational behavior, which had been lying buried for so many years so far, that got picked up again. And I joined ISAB's, Applied Behavioral Science training program. So slowly and gradually, bit by bit, then a year or year and a half later, I returned to register myself a PhD in organizational behavior. ISABS was happening simultaneously. When I got into Appreciative Inquiry, things were happening. And meanwhile, as a family, we came to an agreement between my husband and me that it's time that I quit Indian Oil, because my children were now looking, better and healthier with me being around at home full time. So I had quit Indian Oil, which was with much resistance from the company, but somehow I stuck to my conviction, which was a hard decision because we did not have any savings to us. All my income, as I told you, earlier was, and now it was hard for us financially, very hard. But it was such a beautiful life, because the only home help that I had, I disbanded her. So I was doing all the work, and my little kids with their little hands, they would join in. And early on, they got all the training and life skills. If I'm brooming the house, they would be dusting and they would be cleaning with me and things like that. And I started to do random writing assignments from home. And I started to take coaching classes at home. From class 6 to MPhil, anybody was welcome. And pay me whatever you like. Just make sure it is not so ridiculously low that next day I kind of don't meet you with my happy energy. So just left it to people to decide what they wanted to pay, but would also give my hints like it is too low. So that was fun life, because I was at home. I was studying, reading up at my free will. I was looking after my children very well. And we were having great fun. My husband had tough assignments, so he was very often not at home. Relatives would come, go, visitors. So I was able to look after everyone nicely, happily. And so those 5-6 years were very beautiful. In 2004, I came back to work after my PhD, about a year and a half after my PhD was over. And my children were also by now, kind of more self-reliant. And bit by bit, I had opportunities to join full-time in corporate roles. But I knew that somehow that I wanted to retain my autonomy, creative autonomy, professional autonomy. So initially it was difficult to work in what people would call freelance mode, to be able to balance between your autonomy and also manage your professional and commercial concerns. You would understand it's not that easy. It seems easy from outside, but it's always a kind of little tricky journey to do. So did that, and I think I did that well, because I had made a promise to myself when I came to consulting that never I would do it by ignoring my family or my children. And I think that part of the promise to myself, I fulfilled well. There were hiccups in between. There were times when the clients won't understand and push their need. There were times some clients kind of called me very unprofessional and withdrew the accounts. And I never blamed anybody. I think they were right in doing what they did. But somehow politely and quietly, I held on to my promise to myself. And sometimes the money became a problem. It wasn't like as much as I needed to bring home. I wasn't earning as much as was my commitment to my family budget. But then overall, it was a nice journey, I think.
Neena, you're somebody who is famous and synonymous with Appreciative Inquiry, because the moment anybody mentions that term, the first name that comes to almost everyone is Dr. Neena Verma. So, who introduced you? You very casually mentioned it, but who introduced you to it, and how did you delve so deep into it that you even wrote a book on it?
Thank you so much for talking about Appreciative Inquiry, because that's almost my life. I discovered it while doing my coursework for PhD. So, because my PhD was in organizational behavior and development, so I was supposed to do quite a bit of coursework. And in the course of that coursework, I discovered this methodology. And initially, I studied it just like, any other thing in my coursework and did the required work. But somewhere in my, subconscious, it lingered. It stayed and it lingered. And three things particularly just stayed with me. One was Appreciative Inquiry, one was Jungian depth psychology, and the third was logotherapy. These three things came very strongly to me. I was exposed to so many other methodologies. I did very well, by the grace of God, in transactional analysis, in NLP, in FireOB, I did very well. But these were the things which kind of lingered with me. So Appreciative Inquiry my journey began as self-study. I remember the very first book that I could buy was when my husband in 2005 came on a study tour to US. And so that's when he got me my first book in Appreciative Inquiry. And that was like, for me, such a prized position, I used to joke to my husband that till then my marriage was 14 years and he had never got me a gift, never. And I said, you getting me this book has forgiven all of that. So, Appreciative Inquiry book. So that became my prized possession. And I can tell you which book it was. It was Jane Austen's Change at the Speed of Imagination. So this is one of a very, very solid books on Appreciative Inquiry. So before that, I had already read 2-3 books. I had borrowed them from MDI library through an acquaintance. I was also taking few guest lectures there. So, and with this book, I somehow felt that I do have a place here in this world. And I started to devote myself more to it. In 2003, towards the closure of my PhD, I had already experimented with Appreciative Inquiry as a methodology in an assignment that I was required to do. And it had done well. But at that level, it was still like a methodology for me. It was like a technique for me. It was that I, by the grace of God, I did well with, but it had not yet become opened up to myself as a philosophy of life, a way of life. So that started to happen after 2005 when I got this book and I started to put more and more into it. Still, the turning point came in 2006. When what happened was that my son, who on his very newly acquired bike, he used to go out every day, and every day he would return injured, bruised. And not that he was not biking properly, but he used to just get nervous on the traffic or things like that and fall here and there. So every day, the anxious me, the anxious mom used to every evening would tell him that don't go on the right, stay on the left, don't go on the crowded street, don't bike on the main road, don't. So many don'ts. And suddenly my eldest son one day, he just told him, go bike in the park and have fun. And lo and behold, that day the boy didn't return home with any bruise. He was all right and he was smiling. And he said, Bhai, park was fun. I will now go and bike in the park only. And something shifted, but I didn't pay much attention to it in that particular moment. As we remain busy with everyday stuff, we move from thing to thing. So, but this thing didn't leave without registering itself in my mind. That what shifted? And then thereafter, I started to pay attention to the language that my elder son would use. His language was always what in coaching you and I we call the approach goals, the affirmative language. His language rarely, if ever, had the word don't or not. And his language seemed to work. He wasn't ever a big talker, very frugal talker, and economical, but also extremely elegant with his communication. But his language worked, and I started to pay notice to his language. And when I started to pay attention to his language, I realized that the first classic principle of appreciative inquiry is what he was embodying. That principle is words create worlds. It is coming from constructionist school of thought, which says that, reality as we know is co-created in the moment. And there are multiple realities. And the language, in the way, we relate, human relationship is the central human process. And language and communication in that has a big role to play. And he became actually, in a way, my first teacher of appreciative inquiry.
Oh my God, this is so beautiful.
And I've been, kind of course, with this, I was slowly getting deeper into it. Then the next principle, simultaneity, is, a principle which is inquiry is intervention. Questions are fateful. So, in his conversation with my younger one, when the younger one would say with the summer assignments that, should I do this or should I do that? The elder one would say, what would you enjoy the most? Simple questions. And I started to notice how he was, communicating, what questions. For him, answers were not that important. Questions were. And his questions were simple and affirmative and beautiful. Very simple. So this slowly was taking me deeper into appreciative inquiry. In 2008, I created my first model, which was combining appreciative inquiry principles, using the principles to work with Jungian shadow experience. And I created a 4-aspect model, 4-phase model called MARG, M-A-R-G, MARG, where M is for making the dark visible, A is for appreciating the generative intent, the positive intent of the dark, R is for reframing the reality, and G is for generating a new reality. So that 4-step model, and then I started to work with it in my coaching, leadership coaching, team coaching, even OD assignments. And it seemed to work. The assignment after assignment, feedback was good. I was applying it on myself. 2009, I had come down with an illness, a drug had reacted and it triggered an autoimmune condition. It was bad. And somehow with that, my son only one day suggested, he said, Mama, if this problem has happened to you, it must be doing something good also to you. And I realized that in one stroke, in one statement, he has narrated both M, which is making the dark visible, acknowledging it, that it has happened, and A, appreciating the good message that it brings. And I started to notice my bad health habits, the lack of exercise that I had in my life. I was mostly skipping my breakfast morning meals, which was not good. So many bad health habits came before me. And so this started to become more than a leadership coaching or team coaching or OD assignment technique for me. It became an embodied thing for me, something that I started to work with. And that became my first ticket to entry into appreciative inquiry world, because in 2009, in the World Appreciative Inquiry Conference, which came closer home to us in Nepal, which is where I could afford to go. Before, I could never afford to go. That's where I presented my this model. And somehow I got an opportunity. David came to know about it, David Cooper-Ryder, and he gave me an opportunity to tell him about it. In just 5-10 minutes, and I don't know what I blabbered in those 5-10 minutes, but it somehow clicked. And next thing that I know, a month later, David and Ron very graciously, they sent me a full free scholarship invite to pursue the Appreciative Inquiry Certificate Program at Case Western Reserve. So that is where my formal education in AI began in 2010.
Wow. And your son initiated you into
My
this.
son.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. I
this
would say
is so
my son demonstrated the magic of it to me. Initiation had happened while doing my PhD coursework. But what it really is at its deeper sense, that appreciative inquiry, what I now hold so strongly, is a methodology later. First, it's a philosophy of life. First, you be AI, then you do AI. That's what I maintain now. That being AI comes before doing AI. So that my son demonstrated to me, and later my younger son also. Both my younger son has it. I think intuitively he's picked up appreciative inquiry. He's also presented at World Appreciative Inquiry Conference in 2015. He spoke on the topic transcending grief, deep appreciation way, and his session attracted more participation than three of my other sessions put together in the same conference.
how old was he in 2015?
He was not even 19 yet, but our loss had already happened. And he got exposed to appreciative inquiry when he was in class 11. Once he had a 3 days off from school, and one of my appreciative inquiry workshops in Delhi, and it was that day suddenly a sudden storm had happened in the middle of the winter, and it was like raining very badly. The weather was really bad, and I had stuff to carry, and obviously in workshop you're wearing sari and all that. So he was home, so I requested him to come with me to just kind of help me with stuff. This is a big bag load of your craft material and your post material, things like that you have. And he came with me, and because the weather was bad, he just stayed there the whole day. And he stayed, and though he was handling with the logistics, helping with the logistics only, but he just, sitting in a corner of the hall, I think he did pay attention. And then a little later, then we had held a half-day preview with Ron Fry I had held in Delhi. He was passing by Delhi, so I requested him to be available, and 2 hours of, free to attend. People came from all over the country to attend that. That day also, because it was on no budget, I had no money. So once again, Pratyush was requested, my younger son was requested to please handle the registration counter. So he got exposed to that. And then obviously when you are hearing your mother talk on phone in a small house where dining table is your home office,
Yeah.
you know how it happens at home. True. So somehow I think appreciative inquiry was floating in the environment. And the principles became alive for him in the aftermath of our loss, when just a couple of months before he had gone down south to Vellore to start his undergraduation, 2,200 kilometers away from home, and then the tragedy happens. And then somewhere I think that, the poetic principle that what you choose in life matters, the power of choice. So somewhere he chose, though I was visiting him very regularly, and I was myself totally disheveled by my grief. What I noticed was that he somehow quietly chose to imbibe his brother's values, life values and life beliefs, and start living by them apart from his own values and beliefs. He just, so he chose to create a remembrance within himself rather than get sucked up in the grief outside. Yes. So in that, I think appreciative inquiry also played a tiny role. And later, I was on the board, and I was to go for the 2015 conference, and I said I will not come because I was not in a condition. This boy quietly, he didn't let me know, he sent a proposal. And his proposal and he made a declaration that my mother's on the board. So if there's a conflict of interest, please feel free to reject my proposal. So he received a response that no, she's evaluating proposals from a different territory. So yours will be sent to a different territory, and there's no conflict of interest. And once his proposal got accepted, that's when he asked me, he said, now for my sake and for Bhai's sake, because we had all, we were planning to go together, so you will come. And I was just in tears. I don't think I paid attention to what he spoke as much as the fact that he was up on the stage talking of how he chose to accept his grief, not fight with it, affirm it, and yet find a way to transcend it. I was in tears. I think people heard his content. I didn't hear his content until I heard a tiny recording somebody had made on their camera later. So I think when your methodologies, this is what I've come to understand, that when your methodologies, you start to embody them at a deeper level, when they become you and you become them, the effect starts to float in your environment. For example, anybody can talk of voice modulation, voice training, but the way you talk of it, Rashmi, voice being an integral part of the person that you are, and voice not just being a physical thing, but a complete, how you have taken the aspect of voice at the level of, how it philosophizes the entire personality dynamics of the person. So, and then you don't have to make an effort for others in your environment to learn it from you. Your vibes are floating in your environment, and those vibes, they get picked up for anyone who cares to pay attention. So that's the magic of embodied work. And you are doing it you inspire me so much, the way you're doing it.
Thank you, Neena. That's so sweet of you. Neena, I've hugely admired you ever since we started our coaching journey together for the way you bring in appreciative inquiry. But what surprised me is in one of the conversations when you mentioned that there are many other aspects of you as a coach which people have missed out. And so, if Neena is to be described by Neena, what is it that Neena wants the world to know?
um, just take me as a simple human being. That's how I would actually love it. That professional tags for me are something that, okay, they are a matter of accomplishment. They are a matter of gratitude. I do feel happy when the professional accomplishments happen. That said, somehow I don't have a sense of attachment with them. As a coach, I began coaching in 2005. And my first coaching assignment was team coaching. Can you believe? At that point in time, people had not so much heard of team coaching. I was doing team coaching and systemic coaching before people started to do individual coaching. So I got into coach training only because I could see it coming that very soon people will be asking for ICF accreditation. So it was for the sake of accreditation that I got into coach training. And then, of course, I chose my coach training platform thoughtfully. As a coach, I would say that my work is in the zone of coaching for transcendence and meaning. So it's like I so value breakthrough coaching. I so value solution coaching. I so value what goes by the name coaching for transformation or transformational coaching. Having said that, I personally feel that coaching, and I do quite a bit of counseling and therapy also. I somehow feel that the purpose of these is the coach's role or the counselor's role is to just be a medium of reconnection of the person with their own deepest wisdom. And in that, we use methods, we use techniques, we use tools, what my grief psychology mentor, Dr. Robert Niemeyer, calls procedures. But if, I've diverged from your question, but I will quickly just tell this. Maybe some coaches who are listening to this, they might appreciate this. He has a 3P model, very interesting 3P model, where procedures on the tip of the iceberg, the pyramid. And then is the process, and which is what we become aware of when we stay rooted in the here and now of the coaching space. We notice the process, the underlying process that's unfolding. However, he says that the real crux of the matter is the presence. So he says procedure and process are very essential to this helping profession, but without presence, they're just manipulation or utilization of the technique. And that's what I stick to. I feel that the purpose of coaching or counseling or any helping service is to help the client, to be a medium, whether you facilitate, you help, you support, you do whatever, to be a medium for the client to reconnect with their own presence. So we focus a lot on coach's presence. I say that can we also focus as much or maybe more on coachee's presence in their own process. So in one sentence, who's Neena? Neena is a simple human being who in a professional plane, in a personal life, she likes to do tens of things. The list is very long. But in a professional space, Neena is at the moment, she brings a history of organization change and development expertise, but at the moment is fully focused in the grief and growth specialist work. And as a coach, she focuses on life purpose, resilience, post-traumatic growth, and meaningful transitions in life. And of course, therapeutic writing and expressive arts is an essential part. Poetry, therapy, they are essential part of my work. So this is who I am as a professional.
I think you can't possibly describe you in one line, Neena. You've done so much of work over the years, but now what I'm going to pick from what you spoke about is Grief and Growth, which you're currently on, and that amazing book that has got such rave reviews. What is it that Neena put into that book?
In 2016, I had published my grief memoir. So that was my own story, but then my story is evolving story. And so that story was up till the point when it was published. And that was a story that had spoken to many people on a grief journey, but most to the bereaved parents, even more so to bereaved mothers. I received mails from all over the world. The book was not a commercial success. That was self-published. That was to be published through a traditional publisher, but there were few creative things that they wanted me to do to make it more market friendly, which I was not willing to, because I didn't want to fiddle with the content as it had come out of me. So that was self-published. And but then thereafter, as I was getting deeper into my grief training and my grief practice was also growing, more than my grief practice, I have done a lot of volunteering in the social communal violence space, the victims of the social communal violence. Many bereaved people, many people who are left with trauma because of the injuries that they have sustained, and things like that. So grief and trauma counseling, a lot of that is in the volunteering space. So many people had been asking for a self-help kind of a thing, which could become their coach and counselor in times when either they could not afford or they just wanted to be by themselves, but with a little quiet help, So this had been going on. Then in 2019, Appreciative Inquiry practitioner invited me to lead, edit an issue on the theme grief and growth. They said grief, I suggested grief and growth. And they liked the idea. So that issue, I and my grief mentor, Dr. Robert Niemeyer, we co-edited. And that came out and we really worked very deeply on that. We picked and commissioned articles. 3-4 articles were not up to the mark, but some were really fabulous. That came out in the month of May 2020. The time when pandemic had exploded on our head. The reviews that it got, the response that it got, because it was so timely, that immediately I started to get calls from some established publishers to do a book in that genre. We're combining grief and growth, because many books focused on post-traumatic growth, many books focused on grief alone. Books which were combining grief and grace were more in the memoir category, but There wasn't any book which was a professional reference book, also a self-help book, which would address both the themes together. And so meanwhile, 3-4 months before that, I had sent my memoir to my publisher, Rupa Publications, because I wanted to republish it as a mainstream thing. As a self-published thing, it was not gaining much traction. So during when the pandemic started and when that issue was just about to come out, that journal issue, I heard from them and they said, we wish that we had published it in the first place. This is such a beautiful book, but we won't republish it as it is because it's already there. But we would like you to do this book for us on grief. Initially, I was kind of, I was confused because, on one side is an established big publisher like Routledge, who has a huge shelf on death, bereavement, etc. And there's a certain reputation attached to their name, stature attached to their name in the death and bereavement segment. And on the other side, I was wondering, why would Rupa be interested? They're a popular, trade book publisher. But I had a deep personal conversation with MD. And MD himself explained to me what was his motivation in this theme. And it was so touching a conversation. I don't want to share the details here. But it was a very touching and moving conversation. And that kind of convinced me that he has his heart in place as far as this theme is concerned, which is a highly unpopular theme. And he said, I know that it may not become a commercial success. That's okay. I'm getting into this knowing fully well, it may not become a commercial success for me. And so that's how that was quite an encouragement. I spoke to my mentor, and my mentor also encouraged me to go for a self-help. Because he said there's so many such heavy duty, professional books, but there are very few in a genre where, everybody needs to have a grief companion, but very few people can either give themselves permission to ask for professional help for grief, or people don't understand, their families would not understand that they need help, or they may not even understand that they need themselves need help, or they may not be able to afford it. So Neena, write a book that can become a grief companion to somebody. So I was initially nervous because I was used to doing only professional writing. I had never done self-help conversational style. So it took me a while to pick up the pen and start writing, because conversational was not my, comfort zone. But eventually when I decided to, I decided that each chapter will open with a real story. Names changed, identities changed, only tiny parts of the whole story is shared. But I said, perhaps, stories make their way to the hearts. And so let each chapter open with stories. And through this book, I introduced my model, 6-phase model called growth, which starts with grief and goes to the deep, meaningful transformation phase. So all 6 phases are sovereign. They are not sequentially bound to each other. You can take them up in sequential order, or you can take any 1 or 2 of them and not all of them, whichever calls out to a person. So this book, then Grief and Growth, that's how the idea came into it. I have put my own heart into it. But more than that, I have made sure that when I wrote, I knew my mandate. My mandate is not to share my story. My mandate is to offer you a grief companion which is grounded in science, which is grounded in research, which is evidence-based. However, it is a relatable, conversational companion for you. There's no jargonry in this. The points have been explained through stories. Points are there, concepts are there, but they're explained through stories. They're tiny exercises, reflective exercises, art-based exercises. And each chapter ends with a poetic affirmation, where I begin with a tiny affirmation and then I give you a prompt to write your own poetic affirmation. So I've tried to make it something that you would like to pick up maybe at any page, not necessarily in order. Pick up at any page, and I've tried to make it like that. Maybe at each page, something will speak to your heart, even if just a word. And while writing this book, then between me and the senior commissioning editor who was handling this project at the publisher, it came up. He just loved the fact that I was going to write a chapter on forgiveness. Nobody talks of forgiveness in the context of grief. And he said, Neena, why don't you create a separate part for it? And that's how the third part, grace, came up. So grace, the third part is about, that existential level of engagement with your grief, where forgiveness is an important part. Gratitude, reverence for life, compassion, and saying yes to life no matter what, no matter how. That's what came up. And the book ends with a prayer that I have written, an existential prayer. Thank you so much.
This is so beautiful. This is so beautiful and powerful. I loved it the moment I saw the title itself, and the nice mandala art. Do you have the book with you? Maybe you can.
Yes, here it is.
Yeah.
This mandala is, by the way, also my conceptualization, because mandala is the metaphor of the model, the growth model. The growth model is rooted in mandala consciousness, and it is made like a mandala, the model. The 6 phases, they appear like different parts of the mandala consciousness.
Okay. It's beautiful, Neena. Pratyush, you shared how powerfully he had been part of that conference. Utkarsh, in fact, demonstrated what Appreciative Inquiry is all about. So, how does Utkarsh remain with you?
Utkarsh remains with me in every which way, every step of the way. Utkarsh, from a very early childhood, when he was a tiny baby, 3 years and 5 months, is when he first revealed to us his Sufi side. We had some guests at home, and their children wanted, some relatives had come over, and their children wanted Chinese food and exotic Chinese food. So we lived in a place which was like far away from the nearest market. My husband took them all so 3 of those kids and my own son. He took them all to the nearest market, and they were coming back home. And at traffic signal, suddenly the nephews, they started to scream that, Uncle, see what Utkarsh has done. And what he had done was that the big packet that they were bringing back home of the leftover, the big exotic Chinese food, which had taken away our entire month's salary, this boy just gave to a homeless family. It was early winter in Delhi. December had just started. And my husband was obviously very upset, and coming back home, he was very upset, and he told me. And next day, relatives were there. After they left, a couple of days later, then I asked him, why did you give the food? So Papa said that he could have given money. So he said, but people can't eat money, Mama. It just, this statement shook me. Coming from a 3 years and 5 months and 1 week old child. But Mama, people can't eat money. People eat food. It shook. And so then I said, then Papa said, why did you give this food to them? Mama, food is food. For him, it was not like, this exotic Chinese food, which has come for a cost, which is what we don't ever buy for ourselves, but we had to for the relatives. Things like that. So, and slowly and gradually, I started to see that he would share away his stuff just like that. A year later, when my youngest son was already born, he was 3-4 months. First time ever I had taken him to market for something, to buy something for him. And we were returning and we were walking to the parking. By then we had a second-hand tiny car. And we were walking to the parking, and I suddenly realized that my shawl was missing. And I thought that maybe I've dropped it somewhere. I was looking for my shawl, and then I noticed that my son Utkarsh's jacket was also missing. And I was like, Zap, what happened? How can 2 things suddenly go missing like that? And I asked him, where's your jacket? He didn't utter a word. He just pointed his finger in a direction, and I could see that there were some construction workers who were making their meals, evening meals at the construction site at the end of the day. And he had given away my shawl and his jacket, both to them. And he was quietly walking to the car. Now, these are two tiny examples I can give to you. In no time, it became clear to us that this boy is, we use it as a cliche that so-and-so is different, but that cliche was not just a cliche in his case. He was truly different, truly different. He gave away everything, nothing with it. He held back with attachment. His poetry, he didn't held back with attachment. Anybody wanted a poetry to recite in their school assembly, Utkarsh would write a poetry for them and would let them even claim the credit that they are the one who's composed. He would make clay models for people, give them away just like that. He would make notes for others. At 8 years and 4 months, he became a community educator. He started to volunteer as an educator for an afternoon school to underprivileged girl child coming from the nearby slum areas, which were close to his school. School had started an afternoon school. He was the only child who was volunteer as an educator there, apart from some parents and teachers in the afternoon school. At the same time, he started a weekend pavement library for another, slum area which was closer to our home. So every weekend, Saturday and Sunday, irrespective of the weather, my job was to drop him at around 11. Kids used to wait for him, a mat from home, and 2 bag loads, his school bag and younger brother's school bag, 2 bag loads of books from home, and his water bottle and his tiffin. And those kids, they used to wait for him, and they would keep a patch of the pavement clean, and he would just put his mat there. Soon he roped me into this thing. And whatever be the weather, this weekend library never stopped for as many years as we were there in Noida. Then the endeavor moved to Chandigarh when we moved there. And in Chandigarh, he added one more endeavor to that, which is that he joined a group where he was the youngest kid. All others were, kind of school or college going, or even older boys. They used to go from signal to sensitize the homeless kids on the signal to not fall to substance abuse. So there's so many stories to him. You said, in what way does he stay with me? He stays with me in every which way. In physical form, it is his library endeavor that we as a family have taken forward. So we have been setting up community libraries. So for 9 static libraries and 1 mobile library. And we've contributed to several other community libraries being run by other people. So all this is a self-funded, quiet endeavor of the family that we do. Last year in 2020, we launched an endowment project at his university in his remembrance, which has 2 parts. In 2020, the library started. So it is a tiny library within the university library, which is called Utkarsh Reading Alcove, and which is where all the non-academic, you name the subject and it is there. The books are there, and every year out of the endowment, a certain number will get added. And this year, Utkarsh Fellowship is starting, 2022, the other endowment project. So these are the physical forms, the manifest forms in which he stays. His philosophy is being carried on by his university through the endowment projects. And we hope to start an endowment project soon in his school as well. But I would say, I've never shied away from saying that I'm one person who's been parented by her children. Her children are the biggest influence on me. So Utkarsh, it's a kind of case, you can call it a reverse legacy case, but Utkarsh has left me with his legacy, and his legacy has impacted me in every which way. And if I can inculcate and live in my behavior even 1% of what Utkarsh is and stood for, I think I would justify being his mother.
You are, Neena, for sure. And, the pandemic was one place where we understood how fickle life is. We all know it, but I think for most of us, the fickleness of life was evident. So, as someone who just had him one day and did not have him the next, what would you tell people as part of the grief that they are going through at losing someone very dear to them? If there are like one or two things that they should always remember to hold themselves together, what would they be, Neena?
I think life's transience and impermanence we kind of get to acknowledge and recognize perhaps only when it hits us hard, directly and personally. It's only in the immediacy of the experience, your own personal shock, that you come face to face with life's transience. But that is one truth I would encourage people to somehow keep at the front of their mind and at the front of their heart. And if life's transience and life's impermanence is perhaps the only eternal truth, like Guru Rabindranath Tagore's quotation, I don't recall verbatim, but he says that life is in the raising of the foot as much as it is in the putting down of the foot. So for me, death is not the opposite of life. For me, death is part of life, like birth is. So to acknowledge that life is transient, to know that impermanence is perhaps the only eternal truth. And if impermanence is the only eternal truth, if anything could be taken away, your most precious thing, both my children are the apple of my eyes, but even Pratyush knows that somehow Utkarsh is my soul, so my most precious thing was taken away from me like this in a zap. Until date, we don't understand why he had this massive cardiac arrest at that unlikely age. It was so sudden, like a deck of cards, he collapsed. Then with impermanence and transience being the eternal truth of life, there's only one thing we could remember, that the moment on hand is the only moment you have. And if this is the only moment you have, your only mandate in life perhaps is to fill it with love and meaning. You will accomplish professionally, you will make a mark on professional planes, you would make a mark on social skies, people would know you, people would applaud for you, people would follow your work, you would have amazing followerships on LinkedIn and social media and Facebook and things like that. At the end of the day, when you're sleeping, if you're sleeping with one regret, that I hurt so and so in such a such way, and I'm sleeping with this regret, I don't think that would be a nice sleep to have. So just make sure that every moment is filled with love and meaning, no matter how hard it is, because more moments in life will be hard than easier. Life is supposed to keep us in the growth pain zone. Life is not supposed to keep us in the comfort zone. And if we are in the growth pain zone, more trials, more tribulations, more trauma will happen than we can imagine. But in the midst of this turbulence, transformation is the most beautiful invitation. That's the most beautiful opportunity. Where there's grief, growth is sitting alongside. Where there is lament and loss, love is sitting alongside. Where there is a cry, celebration is sitting alongside. Can you please notice them both and embrace them both together in the same frame? And that is it. That is it. Pandemic is an opportunity where, we all thought that we will come out of it stronger, and we have all come out of it stronger. My humble submission is to just say that perhaps pandemic had a bigger invitation. Perhaps the invitation was to come out of it humbler, warmer, and wiser.
Humbler, warmer, and wiser. You said it all. Do you still have 3 life lessons, Neena, for us?
I think the one life lesson that I would say is that very often in life we are caught in dilemmas, and they're existential dilemmas. To be or not to be is the question, and I think there are no simple straight answers ever to that. There are no simple straight answers ever to that. For me, a trick that I learned over years and that has worked always is one hand on my heart and one on my head. And the moment I feel peace, answer lies in that moment. So wherever my head and heart are in sync, answer emerges from that. It's cliche to say follow your heart, but it's not always possible to follow our heart as it is, because there are practical, implications and complications involved, which head will point us to. But there are always pockets in between where head and heart do come in agreement. It's like we miss them, but not because we can't notice them, but because we are so rushed up in life that we don't have time to wait patiently and watch what is coming up. Watch for it. So I would say that when in predicament is all the more a reason for us to not rush ourselves up, to wait. So like when in a hurry, go slow. That's my one life mantra. When in a hurry, go slow. And with go slow, I would say another life mantra that I've always lived by is that simple, small, and slow works. I've never set for myself, never in my life, whether you believe it or not, never in my entire life of 54 years and now almost 9 and a half months, I have never in my life set for me ambitions which were grand or big. I have always looked for the next small step ahead. What in this moment my heart and my mind are asking for, and what is the next step for that. So, of course, I do not deny the value of planning big, but I would say that your deepest truths emerge in the moment. So keep it simple in that moment. Simple, small, and slow. Third lesson, say yes to life no matter what.
Inspirational, generous, and just being there to share so much of who you authentically are. God bless you. Stay blessed, and honored to have hosted you on You and I with Rashmi Shetty. What an inspiring life. What an inspiring, simple, authentic way of just being vulnerably you and telling us why you're so special. God bless you, and just continue to inspire.
Thank you so much, Rashmi. It was truly a very precious opportunity, and I don't think I would like to ornament it with words. My thank yous truly deeply heartfelt, a warm gratitude, and all the best wishes and blessings for your noble endeavor. May more and more lives get an opportunity to be showcased through your endeavor, and you continue to be the torch bearer of light and meaning and growth and transformation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Neena.
With that, we come to the end of this weekly quest of You and I with Rashmi Shetty. Do let us know if you know people who make the world beautiful. Write in to rashmi.thethirdeye@gmail.com. That is rashmi.thirdeye@gmail.com. Come, let's explore this amazing world together, both you and I.